Behringer surprised the world at NAMM this year with the Behringer BX1. In more recent years, Behringer have taken the stance that they're not attending NAMM. What they have done instead is to launch new products using social media, coupled with videos of the products on YouTube by some select individuals who have prominence in the market, whether it be a mixer market, synthesizer market, drum machine market, wherever it happens to be, but they normally pick some prominent figures within those markets and use them to actually drive some demonstration videos on YouTube. And that's kind of how they've done it, definitely for the last, well, 10 years, I suppose, but really more prominently for the last 6 or 7 years. Recently, we've had the launch of the Wing Rack, the Wing Compact, the Wing Black, their digital mixers. We've had the LMDrum, which you can buy, the Wing Wave, which is their version of the PPG Wave, and a number of Behringer Eurorack modules that fit into the whole Behringer Eurorack ecosphere. But we know all about those. What was really interesting about Behringer turning up at NAMM this year was the new stuff. The stuff that Behringer has been teasing us about for about 3 years on social media, but we haven't yet seen come to fruition. Namely, at NAMM this year, they demonstrated a Behringer Pro16, which is modelled on the Sequential Profit 5/10. The Behringer JT16, which is an eagerly anticipated synthesizer within the community, modelled on the Roland Jupiter-8. And the subject to this video, which is probably the one I'm most interested in, if I'm honest, is the Behringer BX1, modelled on the Yamaha DX1 and the Yamaha CS80. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Now, I've called the BX1 the mashup synth. Why have I called it the mashup synth? Well, it's a combination of two synths, or 2 bits of 2 synths, should I be more specific, that were made by Yamaha in the early 80s. They've taken the FM synthesis engine developed for the DX range of synthesizers and combined that with the analog filters from the Yamaha CS range of synthesizers to produce the sound that this machine or instrument will give you. The synthesizer that was on the stand was functional, and I'm using that word specifically because it's not finished. And what it did, it allowed people to see the capabilities of what this BX1 is going to be. It was demonstrating the capability. The case, the user interface, they were finished. Okay, that's what you're going to see on the model when it comes to market. But the firmware, the operating system that runs this thing, the Behringer team on the stand were very quick to state that this was a demonstration version of the firmware for the instrument, basically so that they could demonstrate it. But there were a number of features of the BX1 that weren't finished and weren't working for the show, and they steered people away from them. But we should give them credit. We really should give them credit because they turned up. They showed something working in a prototype environment, which a number of the other manufacturers won't do. I will be fair to Korg, they've turned up with the Kronos 3 in a prototype version as well. But it did allow them to turn up with the working prototype to tempt the trade. This is what's coming down line. Take a look, listen to what we're doing, give us some feedback. But of course, you're sitting there and you're thinking, what do we actually know about this instrument? Well, the new synth is visibly modelled after the Yamaha DX1 synthesizer. You've all been on YouTube, you've all seen what the DX1 looks like. It's a big piece of furniture, and it is big. It's, you know, it's a two-man lift maneuver piece of equipment. You break your back doing it on your own. However, those that don't know about the original, it's dimensionally much smaller, and I'm going to guess significantly lighter, because it won't have all the circuitry and gubbins that the DX1 had in it to make it work. So in the actual fact, dimensionally, I would say the BX1 is closer to the dimensions of the Yamaha DX5, which was the smaller version of the DX1. So for those that don't understand, we had the DX7 that came out first, and then the DX1 and the DX5 came after it, even though they have lower numbers. So they didn't. The DX1 didn't come out, then DX5, and then the DX7. It was the DX7 came out first, and the other two followed. But the heart of the BX1's synth engine is modelled on the FM generation of the original. That's what they've stated. The original DX1 was commonly referred to as a DX7 on steroids, or 2X DX7s in a box. Behringer used their cloning technology to replicate the way that Yamaha generated these FM tones on this FM engine that was in the original DX1. The BX1 replicates the two FM engines with 6 FM operators per engine. The generation process supports 32 voices, again matching the original machine. Once the tone has been generated, the analog signal is passed into the filter section that has been modelled from the Yamaha CS80. This is a multi-mode filter, can be used to further shape the sound that the unit is producing. And because the synth is digitally controlled, all the settings for FM generation and filter settings can be captured and recalled at the touch of a button. The user interface has been designed so at a glance you can see visually and understand which operators are engaged in the sound that is being produced. If you have used the DX range of synthesizers in the past, you will know understanding how the operators are implemented quite often involves multiple buttons, clicks. So this can only be a good thing, right? The keybed is quite interesting on this new demonstration model, or new synthesizer, because the demonstration model, the physical attributes of the demonstration model are complete. But the keybed that was demonstrated was a 61 key version that does not mimic the original DX1, which had 73 keys. I've seen reference to the fact that the new BX1 keybed is the same as they've installed on the Behringer UBXA, which is the keyboard on the top of the rack behind me. The UBXA keybed also has polyphonic aftertouch, and one of the reps confirmed that polyphonic aftertouch is installed or will be installed on the BX1. We know the firmware is still a work in progress, and this feature was not really demonstrated on the NAMM bench. What I would say although is I did come across, after writing that statement, I did come across another video which seemed to have aftertouch engaged, in terms of it was producing a slightly different note set or tone set based on the pressure that the user was using. But I don't know whether that was a full polyphonic aftertouch that was routed to filters or additional tone banks. No idea how that was being done. But they were, one of the reps did say it wasn't working correctly on the demonstration model, which goes back to the firmware comment, this is a work in progress. So when I get my BX1, what can I connect it to? What outputs have I got? Well, what they've said about the audio outputs is that the synthesizer has the option to operate in 2 modes. They described one as a clean mode and one which uses 16-bit DACs to convert the signal. And the second one they've described as a vintage mode, which mimics the original 12-bit outputs of the original DX1. That will present the associated noise and ambience of the DX1. So basically something for the purists that wants ambient and those that want a clean signal for recording purposes, potentially. The original DX1 was actually a mono synthesizer, and a lot of people, I suppose, don't understand that, because if you look at the back of the synthesizer itself, it has two outputs. And the stereo side of the synthesizer, so the DX7 Mark II was a stereo, but the DX7 Mark I was also a mono synthesizer. So again, if you look at the back of the original DX1, it would have two what looked like balanced outputs for left and right. Actually, what these were on the original is a FM output for engine 1 and an FM output for engine 2, which is why they're labelled A and B. So what you can do is you can take engine 1 off to somewhere and mix it separately to engine 2. Or there is a third option, which is a combined output, still mono I might add, for both engine 1 and engine 2. Now, this has not been explicitly stated in the literature or any of the stuff I've seen so far, whether they've actually retained that feature. However, if you do look at the back of the BX1 that was on demonstration, there was a socket marked A and a socket marked B. So I am wondering whether these are the same engine 1 to A and engine 2 to B. I don't know. It wasn't explicitly stated. So I don't know whether these are explicitly mono to mirror the original, or whether you can, in the signal path routing on the BX1, say actually what I want is a stereo feed coming off this synthesizer, and you plug into A and B effectively become left and right. That was not at all clear in the information that's been published or the videos that have been made. Other interfaces. The demo unit has been upgraded to incorporate both 5-pin DIN MIDI and the option to run USB. Obviously, the USB interface will allow the firmware to be updated together with integration with other functions like audio. This is not unexpected from a modern synthesizer. The demonstration also had units for foot controllers, for modulation, volume, sustain, portamento. There was a socket for a breathe controller. All of these were present on the original DX1 synthesizer. So I'm not surprised that there's a full range of foot pedal interface control there. There's also, as you would expect for a modern instrument, an SD card. Now, I didn't see very much on the SD card until I saw a late video where somebody made the comment, well, you can load DX7 SysX files using the SD card rather than trying to transmit them via MIDI on the DIN or the USB. That could be quite interesting. A very quick way to get your existing Yamaha DX7 SysX files into your Behringer BX1. And they've also made the comment when they made that statement that it will take all native DX7 SysX files. Following the videos produced by Behringer following the acquisition of the Tears for Ears instrument hall a few years back, we knew they had acquired and restored an original Yamaha DX1. This was obviously the base of the BX1, and followed the path for the LMDrum, which was also in that instrument acquisition. The CS80 filters being incorporated on this machine was a bit of a surprise. They have not dropped this information on the social medias at the same time as they've said they're looking at producing a DX1 clone. These are going to be the same multi-mode filters that have been able to operate parts of the spectrum. So don't expect just to be applying one filter. You can apply multiple filters to the multiple tones that are being generated. I think this is going to get quite complicated quite quickly. There are the VCF velocity control filters and VCA velocity control amplifiers. These are modelled directly from the CS80. Statements made about factory patches will contain standard CS80 envelopes and CS80 low frequency oscillators. There wasn't too much made of the filters in the NAMM show as far as I can see. I think this is one of the areas where they're still working on the firmware. They've made statements about what it's going to do, how it's going to do it, but how much of those filters was in the tonal samples and demonstrations that we heard, not really sure. That seemed to be glanced over quite a lot. I said it earlier in the video, this synthesizer can consume any native DX7 SysX patch. So if you've got a standard SysX file from your existing FM DX7 library, you can load it into the BX1. It will accept it. It's also said you can load in all the classic sounds and all your own sounds. So, you know, pretty much we're not quite sure what the factory presets will be, but you can load your own. And of course you're going to ask me, what does it sound like? The demonstrator, as I've said, was very much a pre-production demonstrator. And a number of the Behringer representatives made that comment every time you sort of got them on camera. This is a pre-production. And the operating system for the synthesizer itself has not been completed. It's still work in progress, specifically on areas of the filters. But what I heard demonstrated sounded very much like as if you were playing a DX7 on steroids. There were classic FM E-pianos, bells, low frequency basses, spacey pad sounds and many combinations thereof. Exactly what you'd expect to hear if you were playing one or two DX7s. I made comments above that the aftertouch wasn't really demonstrated, but I did see one guy playing, and you could see from his finger positions that he was pressing slightly harder, and all of a sudden the tonal qualities of the patch changed. So there was definitely some sort of aftertouch running on that patch, but whether it was the full polyphonic aftertouch, I am not 100% sure. There were a series of combination sounds where it sounded like two engines were running, concept to the original DX1, and those patches were obviously stored in the user banks on the synthesizer to allow quick recall, because you saw people playing it and cycling through the patch lists. But because this was a pre-production model, I think there will be many changes based on feedback that Behringer get from NAMM itself. People would have fed back to them on the unit. I mean, that's the whole reason why you go to a trade show with a pre-production, to stir up interest in the market and also get feedback on, you know, can we get something else in there? Can we fix something before we stick this thing to market? But the other side of this, and what Behringer have done with other releases, thinking back to the UBXA, the Wave, and the drum machines that have come to market, is that these units have gone out to beta testers with a firmware version. And those beta testers have two jobs, effectively. One is to find bugs in the synthesizer where it's not working the way it should be. And two is to actually craft sounds that can be included in the factory set that launched with the BX1. So I think there's going to be a number of changes to the sounds, especially when the filter section is, I think, sorted out properly and you can dial in the filters. So my advice really is, if you're interested in the BX1, it's watch this space. And on that note, what I'm going to say is live long and prosper, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.